Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today I'm talking about episode 10 from season 9, The Tempest, which has become probably a very controversial episode for a lot of reasons. Many of you have opinions about it. I have opinions about it. So I thought, well, let's just talk about it. Why don't we? So I hope you'll stay tuned as we dig into this episode. The Tempest was written by E.F. Wallengren and directed by Gabriel Beaumont. It was interesting watching this episode again because my memories of shooting it were how uncomfortable I was with the storyline, with scenes I had to do, with dialogue I had to say, and even having conversations with the director and trying to get some changes made and just really not being able to. And I have no idea why they thought this was a good idea to bring Curt back, and particularly then having to recast. Tom Bauer said that they approached him about doing it. He asked for a tiny little raise and they recast him. And so it was difficult, and nothing against Scott Hylands, who was a wonderful, wonderful actor. And I really enjoyed working with Scott. And I thought he did a really nice job. Had he originally been cast as Curt, I think we all would have loved him just as we loved Tom Bauer. And certainly, it wasn't a problem working with him. It was just, I think, like so many things, why do this? But I thought, let's take a look at the episode. And I think within it are I'm willing now to admit there were some lovely moments about it and some things that I thought were really well done. And then we'll talk about what didn't work. As I'm leaving on the bus with Betty, and I always refer to this little green outfit as my Peter Pan outfit, which I think is sort of maybe appropriate as I embark on this sort of little fairy tale episode in search of my lost boy. But I always kind of got a kick out of this, particularly with the little hat. We see that Jonesy has not left town, that he's hanging out at the Dewdrop Inn and just not quite sure what to do, and feeling like perhaps he shouldn't just abandon Mary Ellen at this point in time. But he doesn't want her to know that he's still in town because he doesn't want that to impact what she needs to do, which is really very sweet of him. We see some process shots on the bus. Now, what's interesting is quite often when we saw buses on the series, they didn't have any windows. They didn't have any glass. Well, they had windows. They didn't have any glass in the windows. And in this case, this bus does have glass in the windows, and we see, a sort of an effect of rain falling outside of the window. So it's funny how certain scenes, like funeral scenes, often happen in the rain. And I guess this was one of those scenes they felt that the rain would add to the atmosphere of it. As I continue my bus journey, Erin, we see arguing with JD about wanting a raise, wanting a percentage of profits for contracts that she helps secure. And JD, of course, just refusing to admit the value that Erin brings and how much she really runs things for him and how lost he would be without her. And then Jonesy arrives, and Erin has suggested that maybe Jonesy come and see if they can use him at Pickett. And so he arrives, and JD finds out that he was in procurement, takes him off, has an interview, comes back in, and says that he has given him basically Erin's job as first assistant manager. And so Erin basically says, I quit, because she's not going to get a demotion and a cut in pay. Betty has suggested that Mary Ellen stay at her place, which is just down or up the road from where Curt is living. And so she arrives there and then goes looking for Curt. She gets directions from the local sort of waitress at the diner, bar, whatever, that it's just up the road to Betty's, and then just past that is Curt's. And we don't get the sense that the waitress has a high opinion of Curt. When Mary Ellen arrives there and calls his name and he turns around, I thought this was an interesting moment because it seems like Curt should recognize Mary Ellen's voice. He turns around and there's never even an instant of like recognition that is masked. It's like he turns around like no idea. It is possible that he recognized her voice and then was prepared to turn around and not recognize her, but we didn't get to see that as an audience. So it did raise the question of, did he really not recognize her? Was he pretending not to recognize her? Had he heard her voice? So I don't know. I felt like there needed to maybe be just a little acknowledgement there that, because later on we find out that he really did know who she is. So I felt like it gave the impression, was he that good that he could turn around and in that moment see her, recognize her, but have none of that cross his face? So I don't know. What do you think on that one? That was kind of like one of my first question marks about it, was perhaps that should have been played a little differently.
Well, obviously I'm interrupting. I'll just step outside, say the alphabet backwards and forwards 5 times and knock again.
Don't be funny with me.
When Jonesy finds out that he basically was hired to do Aaron's job, he feels bad and he says he'll quit. But then Aaron and Jonesy get into a little bit of a competitive thing.
Do you honestly think I'm going to have a tough time working for some 2-bit shovel maker?
JD will eat you alive.
I'll do a lot better job working at Pickett's than you will trying to sell real estate.
So the challenge is on, and Aaron has taken a job selling real estate for Corabeth, and so there's a little bit of this, well, I'll probably do better selling real estate than you will dealing with JD. So it's giving us a little lighter aspect to the episode with that competition as opposed to what's going on with Mary Ellen and Curt. Corabeth has the idea that the Baldwins should sell their house because it's too much for them, and she suggests that because they're close to Aaron be the one to raise the subject. And Aaron's not all that comfortable about it, but she feels like that's her job, and she wants to prove to Corabeth that she can do a good job. I did find this little scene cute between Jonesy and JD when they're both on the phone and they're ending up JD's getting his legs all phone cords wrapped all around him and ultimately, falls over on the desk. So Louis Arquette was so good with comedy, and clearly so is Richard Gilliland, who's a little bit of the straight man to JD, but there's an art to being the straight man in terms of understanding comedy and what it takes to set up the joke that then JD pays off. I also find it hysterical that there's this little thing here with John Curtis where he is totally like mugging and making little faces. I have no idea what he was responding to or what was going on, but just again, the spontaneous aspect of these adorable little actors and what they were able to catch on camera. When Aaron goes to talk with the Baldwins, she pretty much has them convinced of the advantages of selling and moving to someplace smaller. But as they continue to sort of debate about the house and Papa's presence and all of that, she finally basically says, no, you shouldn't sell. It would be the wrong thing to do. So, of course, by the time Corabeth arrives there, the Baldwin sisters then say, well, we were all set. We were all convinced. And then Aaron said we shouldn't. Well, you know how that went over with Corabeth. Okay, we've all heard about the Jump the Shark episodes or scenes or whatever. So our Jump the Shark scene is literally about a stuffed fish. So shark, fish, I don't know. Maybe we could have originated that phrase, jump the swordfish. Yeah. But this stuffed fish scene was pretty much the hardest scene.
I was at war with it for 6 hours. Now, that's a great trophy, but it's a lousy fish. On the outside, it looks the same as it always did, but on the inside, it is empty and lifeless.
I'd never be a man again, just as sure as that fish would never swim.
I hated that they pushed it so far with Mary Ellen not understanding what he's talking about.
What are you talking about? I still don't understand.
About the dead fish and him being like a dead fish. And I just thought the analogy was, was so awkward and so uncomfortable. And, I thought that Scott did a beautiful job acting the scene and playing the scene. But I know I was so uncomfortable doing it because I felt so stupid going, well, I don't understand. What are you talking about? I don't understand. I mean, she's a nurse, a doctor. I think she could put 2 and 2 together, or at least outright ask him. But I guess perhaps they were trying to dance around not actually saying he's impotent because it's the Waltons. But instead, they just, I thought, made everybody look like they had egg on their face. That's just my take. And you know me, I hate to say anything negative ever about the show, but it really was, it was way too awkward for me. And yet, I don't know. I guess we played it pretty believably, but sometimes it's hard for me to watch something knowing how uncomfortable I was doing it and not feel like that is really evident. So maybe it was really evident to you too. When Mary Ellen and Curt finally have their genuine conversation about that Mary Ellen's going back and that she realizes that they can't get back to where they were. I don't know, when I watched the scene, I actually found myself tearing up because what touched me and what it reminded me about was just the honesty of that, and that there had been this relationship between Mary Ellen and Curt, and that it had been between me and Tom Bauer and all the scenes we played. And so there was actual history that I had lived about this relationship. And so even though it wasn't Tom I was doing the scene with, the character, the representation of the character, and the fact that Scott played the scene really lovely. As I watched it, I really did. And I went, oh, there's a moment, and as much as I will never like this episode, I found myself feeling like there were some redeeming moments. The subplot with JD and Jonesy and Aaron was very sweet and cute and well done on all of their parts. And even though there were some awkward scenes and some awkward dialogue, I felt between Mary Ellen and Curt getting to this point, I thought this particular payoff aspect, and that then when he brings the fishing pole to the bus when Mary Ellen's leaving to give it to John Curtis and send a message for him and stuff, I felt that a little piece of this was redeemed. I still don't think it was right to bring Curt back and say that he was alive. I think it was a big mistake if they weren't planning to get them back together, but I feel like they sealed that when they created this beautiful relationship between Mary Ellen and Jonesy, that I just didn't feel like you should set up that kind of relationship and then drop it. And she did the same thing with David, so you can't do that again. So Mary Ellen is just like, didn't have a good sort of track record on this, so you couldn't do that again. But just, it just, I think all of you feel the same way, that it was a mistake to go down this road at all. And of course, JD comes back and on his knees begs Aaron to come back, and Jonesy helps her negotiate a wonderful new raise and percentage of profits. And so something good came out of it for her. It's very sweet then when Mary Ellen gets off of the bus and Jonesy is there, and you have the sense that Mary Ellen has had some resolution on the situation with Curt and now can step forward into this relationship with Jonesy. And for me, it helped to see the episode and see that there were some nice moments, and to feel that as an actor, I feel like I did the best work I could with some very difficult material, and I don't feel so bad about it. I thought that I would just think back and go, oh, I was horrible. I was so horrible in that episode. And as I looked back on it, I felt like I don't feel so bad about my work, which is nice. I don't know. That's just me and maybe putting a bow on it. But, anyway, I'm interested in some of your thoughts on all of what I had talked about here with this episode, if you have seen it in more recent times. As always, wonderful to have Helen Cleve and Mary Jackson back as the Baldwin sisters, Louis Arquette, who was an absolute dream as J.D. Pickett, Richard Gilliland once again as Jonesy, and then Scott Hylands who played Curt, was born 1943 in Lethbridge, Alberta, and raised in Vancouver, BC. He got a BS in theater from the University of BC, moved to New York, where he got work off-Broadway, and then to San Francisco to the American Conservatory Theater, which is where Michael Learned was before the Waltons. And he was an original company member, appearing in over 20 productions for them. He continued to do theater in Los Angeles, including at the Theatricum Botanicum, which is Will Geer's theater in Topanga Canyon. In TV, he did 96 episodes of Night Heat, that's a Canadian series, Ironside, Harry-O, Cannon, Medical Center, Police Story, Black Sheep Squadron, Centennial, Heart to Heart, NYPD Blue, Lonesome Dove, the series, The X-Files, Stargate SG-1, Outer Limits, V, Supernatural, Once Upon a Time, Fargo, just quite a career. Pamela Myler was back as Betty Howell, and she also had been in Halloween as Jamie Lee Curtis's mother. So interesting there. Mo Malone was Estelle, the waitress, and in TV she was in The Incredible Hulk, Lou Grant, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Trial of Lee Harvey Oswald. And then, of course, the adorable Michael and Marshall Reed back as John Curtis, just showing a little bit of everything. Thank you for those of you who have joined me to talk about this episode. I will see you next time for more behind the scenes of the Waltons and more Ask Judy and hopefully more special guests. Thanks for watching.